Okay, coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA Broadcast, Sam Wilson. That's me. All right, we're going to get right into it today. We've got all kinds of good information. Starting with today's show. Now, so far, this has been a radio broadcast that we also put out as a podcast once it goes out over the radio. Starting today, we're going to have the video version available as well at our Patreon page. So if you aren't familiar with Patreon, it's basically a subscription service where you can go and pay a monthly subscription fee to access things like extra content or exclusives or things like that. So if you go to Patreon, that's Patreon, and look up Gear Convoy or Sam Wilson, the MOA Broadcast, you'll find us. There you can access the video version of the broadcast as well. And we appreciate your support for that. Otherwise, the audio version will still be free for everyone. You can access that at the www.gearconvoy.com website. There's a player there. Or you can get it from Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Broadcast, or Apple Podcast, and whatever your favorite podcast supplier is, you can get it there for free. So we don't want to take away the content, but we do want to incentivize some, extra support, and that also helps us to cover the time and everything of setting up the video and everything. All right, we're going to do this since I usually do this broadcast from the sound booth. We're out in the shop today, in the knife shop, so give it a little bit more ambiance and a little bit more room to move around, frankly. So the acoustics may not be quite what we're used to. We have a little bit of background noise occasionally. We got a train station or train tracks not far from here, so I'll try and cut any of that out in post, but if it remains, you'll have to just think of it as giving character to the show. All right, let's get into our first story. Now, we're going to introduce some news stories occasionally, things that I find interesting and want to share. The issue that we face today is everything has become political, and we're not going to bring politics into the MOA broadcast. So we may cover things that involve a, whatever current event. It may be a political event or a news event, but we're not going to inject our politics into it. Everywhere you go, every show, every podcast, almost everything has a big injection of politics into it. I don't want to do that. This is going to be a place where we just do what the news used to do years ago, which is give you the information, the facts, the who, what, where, when, why, and all that, and you draw your own conclusions. So we'll just be reporting on the actual events that we happen to find interesting. So let me get a sip of this coffee here. That is some good coffee. Okay. Nice and hot. We are currently being belted by snowstorms again, so the fun just continues. Let's get into our story, though. Coming to you from New York, the White House blocked an Associated Press, that's AP, an Associated Press reporter from an event in the Oval Office on Tuesday of this week after demanding the news agency alter its style on the Gulf of Mexico. This will make sense in a moment. If you haven't heard about the scandal, if you will, the kerfluffle about the Gulf of Mexico and Gulf of America, we'll get to that here. The reporter, whom the AP would not identify, tried to enter the White House event as usual Tuesday afternoon and was turned away. Later, a second AP reporter was barred from a late evening event in the White House's diplomatic reception room. Now, all this comes from before the inauguration, President Donald Trump announced plans to change the Gulf of Mexico's name to the Gulf of America, which he does have the legal right and ability to do. He signed an executive order to do so as soon as he was in office. Now, the AP said last month, 3 days before Trump's inauguration, before he made the change to call it the Gulf of America, they said that it would continue to refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of Mexico, even though they stated they were aware of Trump's decision to rename it. Their reasoning was as a global news agency that disseminates news around the world, the AP says it must ensure that place names and geography are easily recognizable to all audiences. Now, I don't know what exactly they're actually saying or really saying here, but it looks to me like this is either an ego or a pride thing or some type of battle of wills. I don't know why they would want to dig their heels in. Let's get into this. This week, Google Maps began using Gulf of America, along with Apple Maps and other leading online map providers, began referring to it as the Gulf of America, saying it had a long-standing practice of following the U.S. government's lead on such matters. As of Tuesday by early morning, both Apple and Google Maps, along with other online maps providers, had changed it to Gulf of America. So the AP refuses to, I don't even know why this would come up that often, like how often do you hear them refer to it, but it seems like they're making a point of, well, we're not going to call it the Gulf of America. As a result, the White House, or Trump probably, is the one that said, okay, well, then you're not going to come in for press briefings here in the White House as long as you're referring to it as the Gulf of Mexico. So I guess those two will have their battle of wills and we'll see what happens. But since there was an executive order signed, that is the actual current and accurate name here in America. As far as what people around the world are doing, I don't know. I don't really talk to many people around the world about the Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico, so I can't imagine it really being that big of a deal to most people. But I guess the AP wants to dig their heels in, and we'll see what happens. All right, that takes care of the AP. Moving on, a Florida woman. Speaking of intelligent moves, a Florida woman was arrested this week when she made the decision to call police to report a friend had stolen her marijuana. Not only did she have marijuana with her when cops arrived, they also found that she had 2 active outstanding warrants. For those of you that don't see the video broadcast, this is me staring at the camera with a face of, where do these people come from? Anyway, according to the police report obtained that documented the woman's ordeal, Stewart police responded to a call about stolen property at a Best Western hotel. Let me tell you, if your story starts at the Best Western hotel, chances are it's only going to go downhill from there. During the time, let's see what happened at the Best Western, they found we won't use her name, it doesn't matter. They found the lady or woman, whatever, who gave them the play-by-play of how the theft went down. She was, quote-unquote, hanging out with her, quote-unquote, friend Carlos, whom she had known for all of a week at the Best Western that night. During the time they hung out, she had approximately $30 worth of weed with her. After Carlos left, she looked in her container and believed about half a gram was missing. The only thing she could think to do was to call the police. The police asked her for identification, only find out she was wanted on 2 outstanding warrants, one for missing a court hearing and the other for not appearing to a probation violation for a DUI earlier this year. So, yeah, if someone steals your weed, apparently it's not legal for her to possess there. Do you really think calling the cops is a good idea? You know, we always hear about the Florida man. This was a Florida woman. I don't know what in the world goes on. I've spent a good amount of time in Florida, especially in the Fort Walton Beach, Pensacola areas. Absolutely beautiful. Several good steakhouses went to there. Went to a 3 Dog Night reunion concert there. That was pretty interesting. I didn't really see a lot of this crazy behavior, but these are stories that pop up regularly with the Florida man and the Florida woman deal. So she was taken to the Martin County Jail and held with no bond. Well, I guess she lost the rest of her weed too. This reminds me of an episode of Cops. So for those of you that are young, you may not be aware of the show Cops. Before we had social media and TikTok and Instagram and X or Twitter and all these other different things where anybody could just put live or unfiltered, uncensored content online. The only place you could really see these wild police chases and takedowns was on a show called Cops. And when you heard that theme song, Bad Boys by Inner Circle, come on, you knew you were in for a good time because these were it was the wild, wild west. And this is before, people started getting overly sensitive to, let's just say, the use of force in police applications. So things got pretty wild and woolly sometimes. And this reminds me, sorry, I don't want my coffee to get cold. This reminds me of an episode I saw once where you see these two women in a pretty rough looking part of town. Okay. The cops show up and they go over to the first woman, and she's the one that called the police. And the cop says to her, he goes, okay, you called you called us. What's going on? And she goes, well, I gave this lady over here $20 for something, and she won't give my money back. And you can tell by the part of town that they're in and the way these folks are dressed and looking and acting and talking. You can look this up on YouTube, by the way. It's an easy clip to find. That, the cop knows what's going on. And so he asks her, he goes, well, what's the money for? And she says, it could be for anything. It doesn't matter what the money's for. She goes, well, she won't give me my $20 back. And the cop asks her, he says, well, did you come down here to buy drugs? And she goes, yes, I came down to buy crack rock. So don't worry. It gets better. The cop says, all right, well, wait here for a minute. He goes over and talks to the other woman, who, of course, immediately, begins denying the story. I don't know what you're talking about. She came over disrespecting me, asking this and that, and I don't know, whatever her problem was. And the cop says, well, did you give her anything for her $20? Because the lady told the cop when she gave her the $20, she gave her what she found out later was plaster. It was supposed to be crack rock, and she gave her some plaster. So the cop says, did you give her anything? Did you sell her anything? And the lady goes, no, without missing a beat. She goes, no, I don't even sell drugs. I'm a prostitute. So that ends our foray into the news for the moment and our Florida adventures. All right. What are we here to talk about today, though? We know this is supposed to be a show about survival, about making it out alive, about getting by, about preparedness. What are we talking about? Well, one of everybody's favorite topics when it comes to the outdoors, fire. Let's go to New Hampshire's White Mountains. New Hampshire Fish and Game says a man, he didn't make it, unfortunately. We're going to leave names out of this one, too. A man, 53, was attempting a hike in Presidential Ridge Saturday when the weather deteriorated to winter-like conditions. The Massachusetts man was rescued Saturday night. Rescuers carried him over a mile up the summit of Mount Washington, where he was placed on a truck and driven down the mountain's road to a hospital. Life-saving efforts were attempted for several hours, but he suffered from severe hypothermia and was unable to be revived. Authorities tell them that the man's wife, who had received text messages from him saying he was cold and wet and couldn't continue, and that he felt he would die without a rescue. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. When they got to him, he was alive, but he had already suffered from such extensive damage from the cold that hypothermia wound up taking his life. So very unfortunate. So what went wrong? Number one, it says that they knew the storm was coming in. And I don't know, it seemed like this guy was not prepared for the weather. I don't know about his clothing and other things, how well he's prepared. But the bottom line is he failed to regulate his body temperature one way or another. Either he didn't have the tools or he didn't have the ability to start a fire, because there are a lot of different causes. If you look up the number one reason, or the top reasons why people die in the outdoors, frequently it comes down to falls get a lot of people actually in the national park system, but exposure is what gets a lot. A lot of these stories, and I look up hundreds of these things, or dozens a week, hundreds a month or a year easily. And unfortunately, there's a steady stream, a supply of them coming, because people continually go out into the wilderness and they're not equipped. And again, that's what this show is about. So he either didn't have the tools or the training to start a fire. Now, if he did have both the tools and the training, it could be that the wood or whatever it was where he was to burn, had to burn. If he was above the tree line, it would start getting difficult very quickly to find things to burn anyway. But he wasn't able to get a fire going for whatever reason. Now, that's another thing that comes into being prepared beforehand. You have to know your terrain, your area of operations, as they call it. Because as we talked about in last week or the week before, whenever I would go hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, okay, which, by the way, right now they are just getting hammered with a massive snowstorm. The highway, I think it's 84, is shut down. Bunch of wrecks. The highway is either closed or in serious trouble right now, which is near the Multnomah Falls area. That's about 35, 45 minutes outside of the city of Portland in Oregon. But when you go hiking in that area, there is so much, because it's a temperate rainforest, there's so much moisture everywhere. If you pick up what they call deadfall, branches, things off the ground, a lot of times you can take branches that are wrist thick and just snap them in half or crush them with your hand because there's so much moisture. Now, if this guy was in a mountainous area, which he was, the White Mountains of New Hampshire, clearly there's a lot of moisture, there's a lot of snow. Even if he'd had matches or other fire-starting devices, he may not have been able to get a fire going because the wood was just too damp. And if he didn't bring tinder or other things along with him to facilitate that fire, then things get even worse for him. So, sad story, but that really is the crux of the matter today. It's not just a matter of having, okay, like let's say you got a lighter. Here we go. Even if you have this is a Bic, disposable, good tool to use in the backwoods. These are actually very reliable for the most part. You got to be careful when you get them really cold or wet. They may have issues, but usually a pack couple along, and that's, takes care of that. But if you had a lighter like this and you didn't have good tinder or the experience to actually get a fire going properly in wet conditions, it's not going to matter. And so, unfortunately, that gentleman lost his life. We hope the best for his family. All right, we're going to take a break. When we get back, we're going to discuss fire starting methods and tools and their pros and cons and their particular applications. So the question is, what's your favorite method for getting a fire going? What is the one thing you always have on you if you're going to be in the backwoods and you may need to have a fire going, whether for recreation or for an emergency? Let us know at info, I-N-F-O, at gearconvoy.com. That's info@gearconvoy.com, and we'll mention you on air. We'll be back. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
You're listening to the MOA Broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? All right, we are back and we are ready to get to it. Now, before the break, we were talking about different types of fire starters. One of everybody's favorite topics for discussion about the backwoods, starting a fire. Not the illegal kind, the legal kind. I'll bring it up in a future episode, but there was recently a hiker, I think it was in Arizona or somewhere in the Southwest, that they got lost for several days, and they were able to start a fire to signal for their rescue, but they wound up burning down a chunk of the forest as well, and they actually caught charges over that. It was a pretty big mess. But we'll do that on the time. This is for controlled, legal, safe fires while you're camping, backpacking, or for survival. So, what are some different types of tools? Well, if you're able to use the video version of this broadcast, again, that'll be available through Patreon page, Patreon. If you look us up there, Sam Wilson or Gear Convoy, you can get the video there. You can find the link for it on our website at www.gearconvoy.com, and you can get all kinds of information about what we're doing there and see the demonstrations here. Up first, probably the most common form of starting a fire. Let's see, did I bring out here we go. Just a regular old Bic lighter. Nothing fancy here. The thing is, Bic lighters are, and there are other brands, and I don't get paid or endorsed by Bic, let me tell you that, but I have had the best success along with a lot of other people over the years. Many have had the best success with the regular old Bic. These are nice because you can get them at gas stations, really cheap. You can get the full size. You can get the smaller size. If you're going to use one of these little, butane lighters as your primary method of starting a fire in the backwoods, do yourself a favor and get a couple of them. It's best to just put 1 or 2 or 3 in various parts of your gear, one in your backpack, 1 or 2 on your person, and I usually keep a small one, a spare one, in a Ziploc bag somewhere in my fire kit, which is a separate kit all its own, in my backpacking and hiking gear. Fire is very important. As we talked about, exposure gets a lot of people. All it takes is deviating your core temperature a little bit, and it's lights out. So anyway, the other good thing about a Bic is even after they run out of fuel, they still will spark. And if you have properly prepared tinder, you can still get a fire going that way. We also sell and provide really good tinder at gearconvoy.com. You can get them elsewhere as well. The tinder quick tabs. Here we go. It looks like this. It's a small, I don't know exactly if it's cotton or some similar type of fiber, and it's impregnated with some sort of chemical, probably a petroleum distillate or some sort of petroleum product that makes it more flammable. But the bottom line is, if we take a lighter here, and boom, just like that, you got yourself a fire going. Well, that'll burn pretty good for about, 1.5 to 3 minutes, depending on your environment. Sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. What I usually do is I cut them in half, because a half of one is more than you really need in most cases if you've prepared your tinder. Okay, and just while we're on that subject, what does properly prepared tinder look like? If you've never made a feather stick, this is one of the easiest and most common ways to produce good tinder in the backwoods. Okay, this is a piece of wood here. Again, if you're watching the video version, you can see. If you're not and you're experienced in the backwoods, you probably know what a feather stick looks like. But you can see the wood has been shaved with a knife. All you really do, this is one of our knives, a Packlight, small hollow handle survival knife made in the U.S. Very proud of these. And you just shave the wood like that, and you make these curls. Okay, so for the curls to be going that way, I would have been cutting like this. I eventually cut the top off of that piece of wood. But what happens is, I'm not going to light it on fire because I'm going to use this for demonstration purposes in other videos. But a Bic or a match or even a ferro rod will easily catch tinder that's like this on fire. The other reason this is particularly valuable is you will strip off the bark, or even take a piece of wood and split it down the middle or into quarters so that you can access the drier wood on the inside. Again, if you're in a place like the Columbia River Gorge, like we've been talking about all week or in several episodes, you're not going to find any dry wood on the outside. Even if you peel off the bark, in a lot of cases, it's going to be wet. So you got to get something off the ground and then usually split it 1 or 2 times and then shave down to get to dry wood. So that again it dovetails with that story earlier about the man that died in the wilderness, in the white, what was it? Whatever it was, the White Mountains of New Hampshire. You got to be prepared to start a fire and you may not find good tinders. You may have to provide your own. That's what knowing your AO, your area of operations, is all about. So that is the theme of this show of Make It Out Alive. Be prepared. Being forewarned is forearmed. So don't wait until you're in the bad situation to realize, great, all I've got is 2 matches. If you're in the Columbia River Gorge or where that guy is in the White Mountains, chances are 2 matches are not going to do it unless you really, really know what you're doing. So, all right, let's put this up before I hurt myself. Get a sip of this coffee. All right, what's next? Matches. Another product that I designed and built, although this was a pre-existing type of product, a match safe. These are also made in the U.S. We have them on gearconvoy.com. This is our match safe. Okay, so for those of you that are younger and haven't really been around matches or match safes that much, this is a waterproof aluminum tube, and we take and screw open the cap on this bad boy. This happens to have a hard anodized OD green finish. We have them in OD green and black. We got a small compass there in the top for rudimentary navigation. I wouldn't want to rely primarily on a button compass for navigation, but in a pinch, it's better than nothing. We take that out, and you've got strike anywhere matches. Now, you can put whatever you want in there. For the purposes of this demonstration, I put in matches. You're going to want a handful of those. There's also enough room to easily put in a handful of matches, a couple of those, if I can hold on to it here, the quick tinder tabs. That way you've got a fire kit all in one spot. And yes, the knurling on here is sharp enough to strike a match. You can strike if you have a strike anywhere match. If it's not a strike anywhere match, you're going to need to include a striker strip. Otherwise, you're going to be in serious trouble. So make sure, again, you want to take all your gear, and we're going to get to that momentarily, and rehearse what you're going to do with it while you're out there, because that's the only way you're really going to find any holes in your game. If you do all this based on a checklist or a book or an article you got from somebody else, you're going to miss some things. Nothing really replaces the experience of doing it live, as O'Reilly would say. So you need to get out there and actually practice it. And that's the problem, that we're having this culture problem here, especially in America right now. People don't want to put in what they call the dirt time. They just want to go to Amazon, have their phone, go to Amazon, get me one of those, whatever. What's going to make me the best fire starter? Give me one of them. What's going to make me the best woodsman? Get me one of them. What's going to make me Rambo? Give me one of those. Put it in their cart and check out. And then it comes and they just stick it in a backpack or a box somewhere, and they don't even use it. I was at I had occasion to be at a meeting a while back, several years ago, about preparedness, and it was in a city. Nothing. I'm a country boy. Nothing against city people. We just have very different backgrounds and perspectives on things. That being said, it was about going over go bags and your emergency supplies. I cannot tell you, as everyone started pulling out their gear, we're going through it and looking at it, okay, this is a good idea, that is not. So much of this gear had never even been opened. Some of it was still in the packaging. And I'm thinking to myself, if you've never even taken it out of the package, how are you going to be proficient with it whenever the chips are down? If you're like that guy on the mountains, what if you're getting pelted with rain and snow? It said there were 50-mile-an-hour winds. If you've never used your gear, that is not the time to learn. So the far more important thing than just going and getting what has the most 5-star ratings on, online or Amazon or wherever you do your shopping, make sure you're experienced with it. Okay? That brings us to one of our other products that is a fantastic product. There we go. This is what's called a ferro rod. So for those of you some people will call it a flint and steel. That's not entirely accurate. It's a ferro rod, short for ferrocerium, which is this rod right here. This is a product that we offer, that I designed and sell. Others have done similar things, so I'm not trying to take too much credit there. But I have great faith in this one. We've got a 5/16 diameter ferro rod here. Those are good for thousands of strikes. You may not be able to start thousands of fires, but thousands of strikes. Same kind of thing as the match safe. If we screw the top off here, we've got a compass and a watertight container where you can put some tinder, like the Tinder Quicks or whatever is important to you. Whenever we take like the match safe and the other products and we make mini survival kits, you want to tailor them to where you're going to be. If you're in the city, having strike anywhere matches to start a fire may not really be crucial for you in your day-to-day, activities. It may be more important to have a $20 bill in case of emergency to get home or to make a call or get something, whatever it may be, and your daily medication, because it's a waterproof container. If you drop it, they're not going to be damaged. You're not going to lose it, however you want to do it. But you need to be prepared with those things. So if you're not familiar with a ferro rod, let me show you how this works. This is a used one here. This is my personal one. Let me get my coffee out of the way. Try not to set anything on fire here. We have a striker that you can get, or you can use the blade or the spine of your knife. And you don't have to buy these from me. You can get these similar products anywhere. I'm not just trying to shove my stuff down your throat. The point is, whatever you have, practice with it. But here, for those of you that have never seen a ferro rod, you take it, and it throws a shower of sparks. If you properly prepared your tinder, like if you have a Tinder Quick tab like this here, or if you've prepared a feather stick like this, within a couple of strikes, sometimes one or two, if you're practiced enough, you can easily get a fire going. So why would you want a product like this as opposed to matches or a lighter? Well, the downfall, I don't think I got into it earlier, but the downfall with the lighters, not just Bics, but any of the small disposable butane lighters is sometimes when they get really cold, for whatever reason, they don't work. Probably due to the pressurization of the butane tank inside. But they just don't seem to work as well sometimes. I've had several of them fail me in not even sub-zero, but sub-freezing temperatures, 15, 16 degrees. You start flicking it, and it just doesn't work anymore. The other thing is they are susceptible to water, moisture. That's why I keep one in a Ziploc bag, so that if I go into the water creek, river, whatever, or my gear does, that lighter is going to stay dry. But I've had a number of these over the years get, mildly wet, and they just don't work anymore. So that is a problem. Now you can still strike with them, but you're going to have very good tinder. The sparks out of a lighter that's out of fluid will not be as good as, say, a ferro rod. So that's we have the ferro rod. I carry this in addition to the lighters and usually some matches and other things to get me going because, again, fire can be very critical once your body temperature starts dropping. It goes too far and it's lights out. These, you can take them straight. In fact, I've got videos on my YouTube channel. I take this straight out of a 5-gallon bucket of water and strike some tinder and start a fire. Okay. And you know exactly how much life you have left in one of these rods because you can see it. I usually have 2 or 3 Bics with me whenever I go because you never know which one of them is running low on fuel. So, again, it's about knowing your gear and being prepared, not just saying, okay, I got the best rated one off of Amazon. So you can get ferro rods very cheap all over the place. Remember, though, there are different types of alloys they use to make these for the rods itself. The cheaper ones don't work nearly as well as the better ones on average. So whatever you get, make sure you try it out. That's the main thing. It's about being prepared. Again, we've talked about that. It's just the same thing with knives. If you go on any bushcraft or knife forum or social media site, guys will sit there and talk endlessly about what's the best knife for this? What knife would you take if you were going to do that? And what would be your dream knife scenario and this and that? Because it's fun, I guess, to go and buy a knife and to collect them and to look at them and admire them. I get all that. But the bottom line is people were surviving for thousands of years before we had stainless steel or even carbon steel knives just fine because they made do with what they had. I would rather have or be someone who was very thoroughly experienced with the knife or fire or other skills and have a cheap piece of junk knife than be the person who had the best knife in the world, whatever that would be, and have no skill or experience with it. So that's the underlying theme of all of this. Don't just go out and say, oh, I got Sam Wilson's gear, it's the best, I'm set. Or so-and-so's gear, it's the best, I'm set. That's not what we're trying to get to. It's really get the gear that is best for you, that fits your style of doing things, but then practice with it, okay? Some people don't like, hollow-handled knives. I happen to like them quite a bit. These are made very well. They have exceeded every test that I've ever thrown at them, and I've beat them to death. But for some people, that's not it. Fine. Then don't buy a hollow-handled knife. Buy the one that suits you. But the main thing is, again, use it. Have an idea of its limitations, what the edge retention is like, what does it take to get it, how rust resistant is it, corrosion resistant, and, at what point does it start feeling uncomfortable? How should I hold it? And so forth. Because those skills, that experience, will be far more valuable than just having the quote-unquote best knife on the internet. So that's what I have to say about that. We have one more story we have to get into here. Again, unfortunately, this is a sad one, so we're not going to use names. Let me get a cup of coffee here, a sip of coffee. Okay. This takes us to Franconia Notch State Park, November 23rd of a year or two ago. The fate of a Massachusetts woman who died alone in the White Mountains, again, just like the man earlier was in the White Mountains. Very treacherous weather there, man. Got to be very careful. Died while trying to accomplish a hiking goal is a sad reminder of one of the biggest dangers in the backcountry, sometimes called summit fever. I would argue that exposure is far more dangerous, but summit fever is whenever, in this particular area of New Hampshire, there is a large group of 4,000 foot or so mountains, and it's a common thing for people in New England to want to summit all of them because that's like a day hike. We live at 4,200 feet here in Oregon. That's as tall as the whole mountain there. So these are not huge hills. Okay. According to officials, we'll just call her Nancy. Nancy of Westford, Massachusetts, was trying to reach the summit of all 48 of New Hampshire's 4,000 footers before she turned 20 on Wednesday. She set out alone before dawn on Sunday morning from the Lafayette Place campground with the goal of summiting several of the peaks along the Franconia Ridge, then getting picked up by her mother at the Flume Gorge parking lot by 3:30 p.m. So she started out before dawn. let's guesstimate here, 5 o'clock. So 0500, she starts out. That's about 11 hours. If she gets there by 2:30, 3:30, that's a pretty big day. She wanted to summit apparently 1, 2, 3, at least 4 of these hills before she got picked up by her mother. Unfortunately, Nancy never made it to the parking lot, which triggered an extensive search by numerous rescue crews. So they did that right. She had someone there waiting to pick her up and was told to call the cavalry if she doesn't make it on time. Her route she was using is a popular day hike in good weather, but winter conditions had arrived in the White Mountains, making the trail icy, snowy, and much more treacherous. Rescue officials said that she is an experienced hiker in good weather, but was not prepared for winter in the North County Mountains. This is where she really messed up big time. Her attire and the gear she had. She was wearing just a jacket and athletic pants with sneakers on her feet. So a jacket, yoga pants, and tennis shoes. Though that is not the gear, the apparel to be wearing when you're going to be in the White Mountains and there's snow. She was carrying a small amount of food in a backpack and a water bladder. She did not have any means of starting a fire and apparently carried little, if any, further protection, such as extra clothing, and her only source of light was her smartphone, officials said. So, unfortunately, she made some very grave errors before she ever took off on the trail that day. This is, again, like we talked about before, with some of these remote areas being so close. I'm guessing there was a big city nearby, or she was from Westford, Mass. When you are that accessible to the outdoors are that accessible, sometimes people forget that they can be just as dangerous and deadly. I saw that a lot when I was living in the Portland area. People would be out on the trail. It was unreal with their dressed open toe shoes whenever cold temperatures, mud, going up hills, gravel, trying to climb any kind of terrain, and open toed shoes and shorts or yoga pants were very popular wear on the trail usually for women. You got to know Portland, but very dangerous attire. And she had tennis shoes. So she didn't have a way to start a fire. You should always be prepared at a minimum to have to spend the night if it comes up and becomes necessary anytime you go out in the woods, especially if you're going to be alone. She didn't have a flashlight, no fire starting method, no shelter, no extra clothing, and very little food and water. So this was a bad situation all around. Unfortunately, they combed the region after she was reported missing. They encountered waist-deep snow and faced heavy winds and blowing snow. If you never walked in waist-deep snow, that is brutal. Right now, we have almost knee-high, what's actually a little bit over knee-deep snow. Walking through that to go walk my dog or go get the groceries or mail or whatever is a mess. Waist-deep snow will take the energy right out of you. And this lady was wearing yoga pants and tennis shoes. That is not the proper attire for that sort of adventure. Unfortunately, her body was located at 11:30 Wednesday on the northwest side of Mount Lafayette, indicating she had made it up just the first of the peaks. So she hadn't even summited her first one when she succumbed to exposure, I guess. So, unfortunate, sad story, but you got to be prepared. And that's going to bring us to a topic we'll get into next week that unfortunately she was not ready with, the 10 C's of survival. If you haven't heard of this, look it up. Good information on the things you should always have with you whenever you're out there in the woods. The 10 C's, as in Charlie, of survival. Okay, that's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thanks for your support. Remember, don't wait for an emergency to get your gear ready. Forewarned is forearmed. Because if you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.